So in the 90s, there was beyond the data, there was a need for analytics, modeling, other technologies that sat on top of the data. So then the regulators started to push for ISO to be more transparent, more independent. So then in 1997, they went from a nonprofit to a for-profit company, kind of like forced in that direction. Then in 2009, we basically became Verisk. That's when it went public. They changed the name, and then that's kind of who we are today, right? And so, I think he was also asking kind of like, what do we do in the industry?
Yeah.
You know, we're kind of the industry standard for base pricing tools, right? So for many lines of business, a lot of people know us as for commercial lines. So if like you have a new, let's say you're going to start an insurance carrier tomorrow, Nana Insurance, and you wanted to go into commercial lines, you would probably come talk to Verisk, like, because we have all of the tools you need. We have a commercial lines manual, because we have all those actuaries on staff that are basically producing that base product for you. And so, or if you wanted to expand in commercial lines, you would actually come to us also. So we have many products that really help the carrier not only price the risk, but to evaluate the risk. And so, that's pretty much what we do. What's the next one you was asking about? The team?
Yeah, maybe if you could get in a little bit to what specifically the rating solutions team, the function that you lead, what's sort of your responsibility within Verisk,
Okay.
and what that sort of means for your customers, and the folks that use your products.
Yeah, yeah. So we produce something called ERC, which stands for electronic rating content. And what this is, it's um, the digitized version of the commercial and personal lines manual. So there's around 30 different lines of business that we support from a manual standpoint, and we're going to digitize those manuals. So we not only the tables, but all of the rules associated with those manuals, we're going to digitize it. And the reason that digitization is so important is because it allows it to plug into the insurance carrier's technology stack, right? Because whenever you're getting a premium online to get a rate, you're not going to be rating against a manual, you're rating against some type of software, right? And so they need to be able to take those ISO rates, plug into those rating, pricing, and underwriting engines at the carriers, and for our vendors, right? And so we really, that's pretty much what we do.
So if I'm understanding this right, you essentially offer sort of a plug and play tool for most players in the industry, to be able to say, hey, Verisk has the data, Verisk has how these calculations should look. We can plug it into any tool that we're using, or not any tool, but a number of tools that we may be using, whether that's customer facing, whether that's internal facing, and now we don't have to build that internally as a carrier, and it sort of considers all of this sort of industry information. If I'm understanding that right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's think of it more like a blueprint, because
Okay.
our team, we have some software aspects, but we still sell data. So we really tell them this is all the data that you need for your system. So they may have some homegrown systems, and we'll
Hmm.
tell them this is how you import the data, this is how you use the data to do the rating, and we'll tell them like we're not gonna code the actual rating like A equals B plus C, but we'll tell them A equals B plus C, right? So and
Sure.
that's basically what we do. Like again, we give them the blueprint. Now we have some other offerings that are coming along to where we are going to be moving more into that, to be that tool. So not only give them the data, but to actually allow them to do the pricing and rating also. And so we have a few offerings for that in our group, but for the most part, that's what we do.
Fantastic, fantastic. I want to ask one more question, kind of about your team and your role. Um, when your team is sort of winning, firing on all cylinders, things are working well. What does that look like? What does that mean for the organization? What does that mean for your clients and your end users?
Yeah, yeah. So Our team, we got about 30 people on our team. And so we've got account managers who handle the vendors and the customers. We've got about 160 customers, 21 different vendors that actually consume the ERC data. We also have, uh, content developers. These are the guys who are actually moving the data from the manuals, the PDFs into the digitized format. And then we got a pretty large QA team that checks all of that information, per line, per state. So I mean, we wind up managing hundreds and hundreds of rate changes, and then we have product managers that help with that also. So when everything is the way we want it, we want to be able to deliver in a timely fashion these updates, right? So you have the manual, and then you have something called a circular update. And a circular update means I've made, Verisk has made a change to the manual. This is what it is. And so they're making changes based on, again, loss costs, all kind of industry information that our actuarial team gets, and say, okay, this is how you need to change your underlying data and algorithms to make sure that you stay profitable as a company, right? And so our team wants to produce that information as quickly as possible because timing is everything. So if they know there's a new risk, the quicker that carrier can get that into production, the more that they're actually they're it affects their bottom line directly, right? And we do about 75 circulars a week as Verisk as a company. So there's
Wow.
a lot of activity going on. So our team stays really, really busy. But our main goal from our team is to make sure that we're providing a function that the carriers don't need to do. Like they don't need to go and manually translate that information themselves. We save them all of that, and there's like a single source of truth in our group to make it happen. Yeah,
Fantastic. We, appreciate that. Um, I'm going to try not to go down where I was going to go based on something you just said, because I
that's
think
okay.
the idea that you're sort of a shared service for the industry is really, really interesting. I come from a life health background, and
Yeah,
you'd get product folks all in, at these conferences, and they'd be, using shared data and shared resources, whether it's from the Society of Actuaries or things like that. So I think that um, so being able to see that type of industry cooperation and collaboration is always really, it's interesting where that happens.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I want to get a little bit into your journey. So I mean, you're at Verisk now. You're leading this rating solutions team now.
yeah.
But you've got a long sort of career in insurance and insurance technology and innovation. Tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Okay, okay. I think we was talking about this. I'm gonna try to make the story as short as possible because but it's an interesting story. So
We like interesting.
so basically, I'm a techie. I started coding back in 1982. That'll kind of show you my age, right? I was in seventh grade at that time. But I went into engineering for college. Undergrad, I went to Southern University in electrical engineering. And then for my master's, I did electrical engineering at North Carolina A&T. And so when I graduated from A&T, I moved to Dallas, worked. Dallas was big in telecommunications, so I was doing, I call it chips and dip board design. I'm hardcore nerd, electrical engineering. That's what I was doing, right? Loving it. So, most people say, well, how'd you go from like hardcore engineering to insurance, right? That's like a crazy, turn. So what happened was I actually went in right when I started. I went to go get an auto insurance quote from a Texas farmer's agent. It was right down the street from where I worked. And walked in, tried to get a quote, and he's having all kind of issues with the system, right? He's like saying all kind of not so good words to the system. So of course I'm intrigued now, like what's going on. And so, we get to talking for like an hour. And I still know this guy to this day. He's one of my buddies. But I say, hey, how much are you paying for this system? And he said, well, I'm paying $2,500 a year. I said, okay, well, Texas Farmers Agent. Well, how many agents are purchasing this? He said about 2,500. I said 2,500 times 2,500. So immediately I'm like, man, that's way more money than I'm making, working over here at Nortel. So I called my buddy from school. I said, hey man, you gotta come check this out. I think we can do a lot better than this. And so, long story short, we started doing agency management systems with rating built in, but we were doing it at night, right? So we would go to work doing our engineering stuff, and then we had a little office. I called it a Roach Motel. Had servers and little hole in the wall here in Plano, Texas, and uh, basically we did that for about 5 years, and then we got funding, created a company called InsBridge, and so we eventually got acquired by Oracle. And actually, InsBridge is the rating engine is still in production at quite a few carriers. If you go online right now, get a nationwide insurance personalized quote, is running InsBridge in the background in 2025. And
That's
so,
awesome.
yeah, and so after it got acquired by Oracle, I didn't go on with Oracle. I created another company. It was a consulting company that consulted on InsBridge, right? So we were like, I'm a subject matter expert on InsBridge. So we were bringing up carriers on this tool for the next 12, 14 years. I had about 14 people. Um, Oracle wound up sunsetting InsBridge technically, even though some of the carriers still use it today. They sunsetted, so we had no more clients we could bring up. So I wound up shutting the company down, went to a company called Capgemini. Capgemini is a consulting company. I ran the rating center of excellence at Capgemini. I was at State Farm for about a year with the actuarial and modeling group. And then I went to USAA, running the integration between a tool called Guidewire, which you guys may have heard about, a tool called Earnix, which is a pricing and rating platform. Um, then Earnix, I'm working with these guys. They wind up extending me an offer to come run uh, the product at Earnix. So I became director of product at Earnix for the next 3 years, running the pricing and rating, development. And then I had a guy that went from Earnix to Verisk. He said, hey Troy, this the VP of Rating Solutions is retiring. He says they was like, hey, do you know anybody that knows rating? And he said, I know a perfect guy that knows rating. So as you can see, I've been doing rating for many, many moons
Right,
now. So that's how I got this position. So, and I've been dealing with ISO for since InsBridge, right? So
right,
we were consuming the ERC, so I was on the other side, even with Capgemini, with the Guidewire stuff, so I was on the other side as a consumer of what our group is doing. So
right. So, okay, there is a lot to unpack there. I think the first thing that I want to kind of step into is, so you had this day job, you see this guy struggling with his technology, and you're like, I can figure that out. Um, what kind of gave, so one question there is, what kind of gave you the drive to say, like, I'm going to turn this into a real business? Because there's one version of this that says, like, oh, let me just sort of fiddle around and see if I can figure something out. But it's a whole different thing to turn it into a sustained business and then exit that
Yes.
business. And then the
Yeah.
second part of that question that I have is, what took you from, you were running this business, running InsBridge for a while, and then kind of came back to corporate. What led you to make that decision?
Yeah, yeah. So the first one is, you get this idea. It was all money based at first. I told you 2,500 times 2,500. It was just like, I'm like, man, we could make a killing. And so, but when you get into it, you realize that things are way more difficult than you think. We wind up driving down to the Texas Department of Insurance, pulling filed rates, and really getting into it. So we didn't really know whether or not it was going to become a business, at first, because we're like, man, this is like way too much. And so, but then we immediately saw that, hey, this is a niche, and there's a different way that we can even use this than the agency management system, right? And so it just kind of grew. The more you kind of know about the industry, the more you realize that, hey, this can actually serve a big need for the insurance carriers, and and then you're doing something that you're really passionate at because you kind of came from, the ground up. It was kind of
Right.
hard for me once we got funding to leave engineering because I'm still a nerd. I still like electrical engineering stuff. So it was kind of, hard to do, but it was something that we had done from scratch. And
Yeah.
so the business just kind of grew out of, it wasn't us coming up with this big old, business plan. This is how we're going to do it. It just kind of grew, and it just happened. And so it was just a blessing. So that's what happened.
No, and then that second part. So what made you say, okay, like I've lived this entrepreneur life, I've built something from the ground up. Let me go back to the motherships.
Well, this is there's the dark side of entrepreneurship. Okay. And so most people see, oh man, I'm gonna own my own company. It's gonna be great, and which it is. It's great, but when, especially on that second stint, when I was running a consulting company, had 14 employees, there's there's cash flow, there's payroll. I mean, I used to have hair. I used to not be gray. And, when companies are slow to pay you, and, you get all, I tell people I got an MBA by fire, right? Because, payroll coming up on Friday. It's Tuesday. I don't have the money because the companies ain't paid me, right? They're waiting 90 days and they owe us a lot of money. And those are the kind of things that really, they grow you, they make you, you learn from it. But once that they stopped doing it, it became harder for us to get the contracts, and that's where
Right.
I actually wound up shutting the company down. And I went on to Capgemini, which I hadn't been at a company for a long time. And so it was but the cool thing about it is, the next year I went on vacation with my family to Disney World. And they all remember because I really didn't take vacations, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
you're
Right.
trying to run a business, and everything is urgent. So I'm quite pleased where I am now. Taking PTO is really nice. Not having to really worry about payroll and all those kind of things is really nice. So, I think you can take the entrepreneurial spirit and apply it across, whether or not you actually have your own business or not. You can do that. So anyway.
So there's that kind of leads me to my next thoughts around leadership. But folks who know me on this call know that I'm laughing because I currently work in a startup right now, and everything that you're saying is super resonant. Always on. You don't know what's about to happen. You think you have one job, but you also do finance and
Oh yeah.
operations, and you're chasing customers down for money. So all those things are relatable. Um, the question I have next is kind of as you've transitioned back, what were the most significant lessons that you took from entrepreneurship, building a product, to going back to leading teams inside a corporation? What were the things that most helped you, um, be able to drive team success from a leadership perspective based on your
Yeah.
entrepreneurial experience?
Yeah. 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 There's a lot of things here, right? I think just the mere fact that again, I had the entrepreneurial spirit. I actually embrace problems. I actually like problems. And so, because, you know, I see that, hey, there's a need, so there's a solution. And so I really get into that. And I think people, uh, kind of gravitate towards when I'm, leading and I get into it. Uh, they know that I'm into it. I'm not just here trying to be Mr. Manager, trying to be over. They know that I'm invested in, whatever I do. I'm gonna tell a quick. People who know me, they know I tell a bunch of stories. But
Please
there's
do, please do.
there's a there's a movie. One of my favorite movies is it's Gladiator, and the reason Gladiator is one of my favorite movies is because of the leadership aspects. And so if you remember the beginning of the movie, he's a general and he's leading his troops. Well, he's not leading his troops from way far away. He's actually in there with them. He's fighting with them. And so because, when they finally won the battle, he's with them, they really embraced him because he's like one of them. And that's kind of how what I do, right? Like I'm part of the team. They know that I know what they know. And, we kind of, so I'm not just like telling people to do things that I wouldn't do myself, right? And another thing that I think has helped me that I had to learn over the years is staying calm. Staying calm at all times helps you think clear. When you get frantic and you make rush decisions, you're probably going to make the wrong decision. And I'm saying that from a wisdom standpoint because I've been there, that made the wrong decision because you're trying to make it fast and you're kind of in a frantic state. And then the last one I want to just tell everybody, and this not just business, this is life in general. You can't worry about things that you have no control over, right? And so if you can kind of just keep that to you, remember that one piece because your worried cycles take up all these other cycles, take up your creative cycles, take up the things where you can actually be doing things, but you're worried about things that you can't change. And so just realize that, and I think you'll be good.
It is wild how you are literally speaking to the week that I'm having in my entrepreneurial life. So I appreciate you speaking life into me personally. Um, I want to kind of tie this back to, there's a number of actuaries on the call, and a lot of the reason that we've started this program is really around being able to provide perspectives to actuaries from other areas of the businesses that we're in. Um, and so, what's your experience, been working with actuaries, whether it's been on the entrepreneurial side, whether it's been on the corporate side, and what are things that you think that we can do? And I say we in terms of the actuaries that are going to be working more on the commercial lines or the types of products that you service, but even just in general, um, to be able to deliver more value um, in this sort of tooling space? And then, are there any trends that you think that we should be thinking about or be aware of in your world around improvements to ratings, to rating, improving to rating tooling, and things like that?
Yeah, yeah, right. The first thing that comes to mind is, because I worked at Earnix, I'm coming from Earnix, which is over a pricing and rating tool. So Earnix started off as an actuarial tool, like complete actuary, then went into rating. So, I was a lot of customer visits with actuaries and pricing managers, but I see pricing, getting more and more sophisticated, right? The more data that we have access to, the more complex the pricing becomes. And with that, you need to make sure that your tool set is good. Most of there's like a blend between the actuary and the data scientist, right? Like knowing Python, knowing those modeling tools. People are always coming out with new tools. I would say embrace some of the new technology. Really get to know it because technology is your friend today, right? It's I call it beyond Excel time, right? It's Excel has a lot of data limits, and when that's when you got to learn how to code, learn how to model, and that fits right into kind of what we're doing because it will take the data that we're providing as a blueprint, but you still got to run a million policies on it, or whatever, depending on what your book of business is. And so yeah, I mean, definitely just lean into technology. Of course, AI is really the thing. From a data standpoint, you're really talking more like machine learning type stuff. Our group is doing more AI stuff also, and that's helping us not only produce what we're providing to the insurance carriers, but also to give them insights on what the changes are. So like when a rate change comes in, we use AI to help the actuary or the product team say, okay, this is a big rate change, small rate change. These are the actual things that have changed, and so we try to break it down and give a nice report to help them out. So AI is definitely really big in your industry.
So we're hearing embrace technological change and embrace AI as a tool for our work.
Yep.
Um, the final question before I open it up, I kind of want to hop back to the leadership side. Um, what has been your greatest win as a leader in your career, and why do you think you were able to generate that win as a leader?
Uh, that's a tough one. So, of course, I could just immediately just say InsBridge. But I think the it goes back to again people believing in what you're doing. We when I was at InsBridge, we were running out of money at one time. And so I was pretty transparent with everybody, hey, we're running out of money. And so I was like, we basically needed to have some win. Our customers loved it. And but I told them, hey, if you're nervous, scared, I'm not opposed to you using company time to basically look for a job, right? Like, because it's going to get to a point where I'm gonna try to have some severance for everyone, and because I'm a people person. You get to know the people. I knew everybody, and so I didn't. I actually cared about their well-being, right? And so what happened was nobody was looking. Everybody rallied around trying to make sure we stayed open and did everything they could. Nobody was really gave it a second thought. And, eventually, we wind up doing a whole bunch of things to stay open at that point, and we wind up getting acquired. And but it was really around just having the team trust in what we were doing, and just having a personal relationship, and they just kind of believed in the whole goal of what we're trying to do. And I take that same energy to what I'm doing here at Rating Solutions. We're trying to make a bunch of changes. We just had a really big win just about a week or so ago, where we were able to release the ERC content on the same day it was approved. That usually does not happen. So we're putting in some new processes. Since I got there, the team's excited about kind of the energy that because just like I'm talking to you now, that's how I talk to them. I'm like, oh, kind of pumped up about what it is that we're doing, and so they kind of feel it. And so with that, that's kind of what it is. So
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, I'd like to open it up for, Troy, we thank you for, kind of telling your journey and the transitions and how it's all kind of connected.
yeah, no
We really
problem.
appreciate that insight and perspective. So yeah, now I'd like to open it up to the folks on the call. What questions do you all have? And if you could throw your hands up, then I at least can see them. Or is there not a hand raising feature in Zoom?
I always use Teams, so I don't know.
I don't see a hand raising feature, but
Oh
I
yeah, just unmute and ask. That's fine.
if I may ask, hi Troy, my name is Paul.
How you doing, Paul?
Hello. Uh, well, I have a multi-part question. Don't know if you can hear me. I seem to have frozen off here.
That's okay.
Um,
I can hear
We
you.
can hear you.
awesome. So I have a multi-part question for you. The first part of the question goes to your time with InsBridge when you were building that business up. This was an opportunity that you identified and were able to execute and scale. Could you speak to other opportunities prior to that, if they exist, that you attempted to fix, other problems that you attempted to solve within that entrepreneurial space? and failed, and what lessons you took from that that enabled you to succeed with InsBridge?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like InsBridge was really my first major endeavor because I remember I just came out of college. I just came out of grad school, right? But so I really didn't have a whole lot of business acumen at all. I only really had work experience. I used to I've done a bunch of different things. If anybody's from the South, there were these things called frozen cups, right? When I was in high school, I used to sell that in the neighborhood, right? So I was always doing some type of business thing, but there was nothing that can compare. There was no real business failures per se, only, projects and things that I had done, uh, from interning. I did a lot of internship at Motorola for many, many moons. But yeah, that was really my first endeavor, and I got a big taste of it just from that first endeavor. So hopefully that helps.
It does. Second part of the question has to do with your pivot back into the corporate space. Have you had opportunities to become a corporate entrepreneur? So starting something up within an already established organization. If you have, could you speak to that and how you were able to move the idea, scale it within the culture of the organization that you were in?
No, that's really a good question. I mean, I think it happened at Capgemini. There was no rating center of excellence when I started, right? And so I actually, started that, got all the different people, the consultants to get together to do rating, which actually became, it's still around today. So it actually became really, really good from a consulting standpoint. And even when I went over to Earnix, there were quite a few initiatives. That's one of the reasons they hired me, is because I knew ratings so well, and so I was able to take quite a few different features and functions that they really had no idea that they should be doing it, or that we should be doing it at the time, and really going from nothing to presenting at some of the major trade shows, right? So we were presenting at Guidewire, Connections, at ITC, and these were all, ideas that literally didn't exist when I first started. And then there's things that we're doing now, even at Verisk. There's some things that we're gonna do. Uh, that nobody thinks that we could do or have done in the past, and so we're gonna take it's gonna be that same spirit, and we're gonna make it happen. And the thing is that I don't actually, I have a different train of thought. Like, I don't think it's gonna happen or hope it's gonna happen. I kind of know it's gonna happen, and so I that's kind of how I think about things. I'm very, you know, you just kind of gotta know it and kind of move in that direction. So
Appreciate that,
hopefully that helps.
Paul. I see Becky and then Joseph.
Hi. So my background is in healthcare. So I always think of regulatory and policy constraints
Okay.
in which using the data. So I just wanted to just maybe have you comment on some of that in the commercial lines world.
So can you? I'm trying to understand the question again. Can you say exactly?
From regulatory constraints or privacy issues, I guess, too, in terms of the data that's being culminated, that is being sold to carriers to use for pricing and rate
I
management.
got you. Yeah, a lot of what we do piggybacks off of the commercial lines data. So there's nothing from a regulatory standpoint that we're trying to do that wasn't already worked out by our regulatory team. So we have a regulatory government team that deals specifically with the state entities. They make sure that whatever we're doing is compliant. Our team really doesn't deal with the actual compliance part of it because we're basically the byproduct of what a team has already done, right? I see Joe is on the call. So Joe and his team were actually doing some really good work to basically set up the data so that we don't have to worry about that from a consumption standpoint. How we distribute the data, and there's no PII constraints or anything like that for us, but from a regulatory standpoint, that's already done, and we're just want to make sure that we're a delivery portal of things that have already been done by another team inside of Verisk. Hopefully that makes sense. So.
Okay, yeah, they so like on the health side, there's something called an all payers claims database that certain states have them up and running, not necessarily all of them, and then there's some like nationally based. Now, mind you, it's only a certain subsection of health insurance products. So like employer sponsored benefit plans,
Okay.
Affordable Care Act related type of products. So on the health side, at least if we're trying to pull data in, to use that in terms of getting some guidance on pricing or rating, that exists and has been called and gone through, I guess, all those bells and whistles of any sort of legislative constraints.
Yeah, so if we're going to use any type of new data source, which we get new data sources all the time, we have, again, there's another group that makes sure that we have the proper sources and the proper regulatory constraints before we actually use those data, that data. Then we take that data and analyze that data to come up with the rating, the rules, the tables that then get distributed to the actuaries, right? And so again, that's really not in my wheelhouse as far as making sure that the appropriate data source is regulatory compliant or not. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And then I see Joseph.
Hi. So yeah, I work with Troy. It's been a pleasure for it's been less than a year, but every time I interact with Troy and I hear his stories, that they're fantastic. And I just want to have a couple of comments. I don't really have a question for you, Troy.
Yeah.
I love the attitude, the whole problem solving is the engineer's mindset, right? And that you went to school for. And you brought to everything that you did, and the whole servant leadership, it really resonates with me, and I'm glad that you're sharing that sort of thing. Get roll up the sleeves and get in there in the fight. And the movie that I think about is We Were Soldiers.
Oh, yeah.
Where the colonel is the first one off the helicopter and the last one out. So
that's right.
That's a great presentation. I'm glad I joined. I'll let folks that have questions jump in.
And I just wanted to thank Joe personally for, he's the guy who actually got me connected to be on this call, right? And so, we met, as soon as we met, he said, hey, I think you'd be great to go and talk to the group. And so I thank you, Joe, for making this happen. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that connection here. Any other questions? And feel free to, just hop off mute and go ahead and ask. We've got about 12, 13 minutes to kind of for an open Q&A. Otherwise, I will ask questions. I'm just looking back through to see if anyone's got anything. All right, I'll go ahead and throw one out. Because this is something that I contemplate on a weekly basis. What was the biggest sort of surprise or the biggest change for you when you went from running InsBridge and running that consulting firm to hopping back into a corporate role? What shocked you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, when the first jump was to Capgemini. And so I told you, Verisk is 7,000 employees, but Capgemini pushing 300,000 employees, right? Like, so it was really, really a big company. So just the shock was that, I was, kind of small in the grand scheme of things. At Verisk, I can actually talk to HR. At Capgemini, I could not. Right. It was like I had to send an email, and so it was just the sheer size of some of because I was always used to the intimate relationships, right? And so, but once I got into it, I realized that a lot of even the larger companies wind up being like these subset of smaller companies, right? So they're like, once I got in my group, I realized that, hey, it's a 300,000 employee company, but this is my group, this is my team, and I foster those relationships, and it's the same thing with Earnix and even coming into to Verisk, right? So I don't try to think about the whole thing. I just think about you know just my team, and how my team affects the people around it. So
Gotcha. Paul, I see your hand up.
I do. I do have it up. Many questions on my end. Going back to your time at InsBridge, Troy, I'm going to dig a little deeper into that. Specifically, could you speak to you mentioned when you embarked on that opportunity, you were working full time and you were building this solution.
yeah.
Could you speak to how you identified your partners? You mentioned you had this buddy from college that you called up.
Yeah.
Was it luck that you were aligned and this individual was motivated and able to pull in the same direction as you? Or was there something else that you identified in him that you found necessary? And then also how you went on to build your subsequent team from that. And then the second question has to do with sales. You've built this product, this replacement product that you believe is better. Could you speak to how you were able to get those initial sales before you got the traction? How you were able to get agents that have a platform that they are confident in, even though you notice it's deficient, to trust you and what you are offering and give you a chance.
Yeah. And so I'm gonna try to see if I remember everything. So the first question is about the team and how I got partnered up with the guy that I first partnered with. And so I'm a destiny kind of guy, divine intervention kind of guy, right? So things just kind of happen, right? And uh, this guy I've been knowing all throughout college, and I just knew he was the guy, right? Like we both been coding for forever. He actually is married to my first cousin, so we're like, we're like this, and so, but then after that, I just went to people that I knew, like my circle, because I'm around a lot of technical people, and so I really stayed inside of my circle. But it's really easy to tell when some people are can do this and some people can't. So some people were not for what we were doing. Like we really didn't get much sleep, right? We were, we were working all night, all weekends for multiple years and wasn't getting paid. And so and some people weren't cool with that. And, so they're going to naturally kind of fall off, right? And so the team just happened organically. And then after we got funding, I stay again close to the circles, and some of them I just actually put out, job recs and interview people, right? Some of them I still remember to this day. I pride myself on evaluating talent. There's a certain feel I get when I talk to people right off the bat. Like I can probably know whether or not I'm gonna hire you within the first 3-4 minutes before you say anything else. And so there was this one lady that we hired, and she, fresh out of college, fresh out of Baylor, but she grew up InsBridge, went on to CNA. She's now at UFG. She's the chief operating officer and chief admin officer over there. So she's been VP at CNA, and it's just really cool to see people that have started and then so again, I don't evaluating talent, it's just kind of been a blessing. And so the second part was the sales. Sales were very difficult. We went immediately from agencies to insurance carriers. That was our major customer. And insurance carrier sales cycles are very, very long, right? Like a year and a half to 2 years. And so it takes a lot to sell these insurance carriers because whenever you're selling them new rating, new pricing tools, you're really changing the way they do business. Like the carriers make money from rating. That's how all the revenue comes into the company. And if you're going to change how they're going to do that, everybody's going to be involved, from the VPs, president, everybody's going to be involved in that decision. And so it's not a trivial decision to make. And because of that, it takes a long time. And then the conservative nature of the insurance carriers, they'll take a month to approve just anything. So it's so that makes the sales cycles just take a long time. And it's the same thing even with Verisk, because we're still selling to insurance carriers. And so insurance carriers are very conservative, and it just takes a long time to make the deal happen. And you just got to kind of know that. So hopefully that answered your questions. So
we got time for maybe, oh, Jeff, and then we got time for maybe one more after that. So if you got questions, get your hands up, because we've only got Troy for another 3 or 4 minutes. Yes,
Hey,
Jeff.
Troy, one of my questions was just how you managed your way through transition, right? Like, when I look at your bio, there's a lot of you've done a lot of cool work. Can you talk about just how you have just managed those big transition moments, when you think about that transition from Capgemini to Earnix, and then Earnix into Verisk? How did you kind of walk?
yeah.
What advice can you give us,
The,
some
the,
younger folks?
that's great. The biggest advice I could give is don't burn bridges, right? And be very transparent, right? So I was very transparent with Capgemini moving to Earnix, and there was synergies there, right? Like I'm still close with the Capgemini folks. They knew why I was making the transition, and then even going into Earnix, they knew why. They knew why I was going to Earnix, and I had to be really transparent about coming to Veris from Earnix, because there's certain products that may have some competitive nature to it, specifically rating. So again, I was very transparent with, this is what I'm doing. This is how I want, I'm not competing with you guys. And then they all become, they root for you. They root for your success. I see them at the trade shows. I'm gonna see them. I just went and presented at Earnix about a month ago. Our actual proposition, we're partners. And so anyway, whenever you're making transitions, try to transition as cleanly as possible, as transparent as possible. Don't burn bridges, because you never know. That job I got at Capgemini was from a relationship. I knew the head of Capgemini North America from a previous uh, thing we did with CNA like 10 years before. And then I called him up and I said, hey, you know, I had to shut my company down. I need a job. He says, oh, Troy, why you ain't say so? And then, and then that's how, I didn't apply or anything like that. It was just basically who I knew and keeping good relationships. So.
Appreciate that, Troy. We got time for maybe one more question.
Okay.
Any takers? All right. I'll pass this on to Parker to close us out here. But Troy, we are so grateful for your time and your wisdom and your perspective and your insights. This has been truly a pleasure to get to learn a little bit more about you and your journey and how you've navigated these various really opportunities, right? As you know, as much as some of them might have been challenges, it sounds like a lot of them have really been opportunities to kind of
Yeah.
take advantage of and figure out. And so I think there's wisdom, in that for all of us to take. So
Well,
we really
thank you,
appreciate
Nana.
it.
I really appreciate it. We enjoy being here for sure.
Appreciate it. Parker.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I also want to thank you, Troy. I think as someone who is not an actuary and doesn't, maybe understand all the technical aspects, I think you really did break down a lot of these concepts for people like Jeff and I to understand. And it was a pleasure to hear about your journey as well. So I want to thank you for joining us today and everybody else for logging on and really listening to Troy's amazing advice and journey. I love these coffee conversations because I learn something new every time, and I hope you all do too. So, thank you all again for joining us. I'll be sending out an email again with just a survey about coffee conversations so that we can make these better and better every time. Our next one is going to be October 30th, I believe, and it's a pretty big one. I'm not gonna spoil it, but our next coffee conversations will be then. So again, thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you, everyone.